I'm Dr. John, and this is your Maintenance Minute. Hey, look, we're going to change it up a little bit for this episode. I want to talk about leadership. There's a lot of traffic on YouTube and LinkedIn. Leadership is floating to the top of the conversations. I won't get into the national politics of why that might be, but I do feel somewhat qualified to talk about this subject, although I haven't really specifically talked about leadership in the maintenance or anywhere else. But I feel qualified because it was actually the topic of my dissertation. In fact, my dissertation is titled Leadership Development for Engineers and Technical Professionals, a case study. So when I was working on my PhD, this was actually the subject of my work. So again, I feel fairly qualified to talk about this. Look, in my dissertation, I asked a question early on at the end of my thesis statement. At the end of it, I asked a specific question: are we developing leaders today? Now, back when I wrote this in 2007, I didn't believe that we were. In fact, I felt that we were really developing great managers. Look, we're managing budgets, we're managing people, we're managing projects, we're managing programs, we're managing chaos and crisis and schedules and those kinds of things. We're building great managers, but what we really need is leadership and developing leaders, and that's specifically what I was talking about. So my question, I think, still stands today. Are we developing leaders today? And I don't know that we necessarily are. Not in the technical fields, not in the rate that we need to. And in fact, I don't know that we're actually developing leadership anywhere. Oh, sure, we have classes and finishing schools and banners and slogans and these kinds of things. But I mean, real ironclad leadership where you're challenged and you're creating things and you're leading things. I suspect on some small scale we are. I think we need a real evolution, possibly a revolution on this. But the good news is there's many folks out there that are making this happen. I've got a little list here. I'll talk about this in a minute. I did a survey as part of this, my doctorate work here. I did a survey with hundreds of people. And one of the things that kept popping up as far as a trait of a leader was that they eliminate obstacles. In fact, it's a fair bet that if you've ever sat in any of my classes, you've heard me say that a leadership's role is to level mountains and to straighten roads. And I think that's very true. That's what a leader does. They don't browbeat you and micromanage you. They clear the path for you. Now, you got to do a little bit of the whacking to get through the jungle as well, but they're going to direct it, they're going to show a path, and they're going to clear the major obstacles. So eliminating obstacles is really important. Here's what I want to do in this Dr. John's Maintenance Minute. I really want to point out some work that three of my really good friends are doing, and I think this bears your attention. If you're not already involved and engaged in some of these discussions, I would recommend that you do, because these are three highly qualified people, and I really look up to them and I think the world of them. But let me tell you a little bit about them. Tom Furnival, who is the vice president of Marshall Institute, is a very dear friend of mine. I've known Tom for a very long time. Tom was a utility player in every major role at Marshall Institute. He's now the vice president. And every single role he had, he was creating things, forming teams, bridging relationships, and creating new things for Marshall Institute. And they've benefited greatly from Tom's work and certainly Tom's leadership. He's got a lot of great webinars on the maintenance community, and I recommend that you check those out. And they're on the subject of leadership. Just a tremendous speaker. I think you will enjoy those. This next one is Steve Baumgartner. He's got a podcast coming out, and I think it's in August, so he's doing all the mechanical work to get that going, but it's called Fire Forged Leader. Now look, Steve used to work for me way back when he was just a little maintenance manager, way back when, and Steve can remember that. And I got to tell you, this man's got a rags to riches story. This is a person who has overcome all kinds of things, and he has just really developed into a tremendous leader. I'm extremely proud of Steve. I believe his podcast is going to change lives. It hasn't come out yet, but when it does, I encourage you to subscribe to it. And anytime you get a chance to listen to Steve Baumgartner, I encourage you to do so. Steve and I have been good friends for a very long time. Again, that's Fire Forged Leader, and I believe his podcast is coming out in August. Joe Kuhn is somebody that I just met last year, actually. He runs a program called Lean Driven Reliability. I think that's the name of his company. But I was given the keynote address at the Reliable Plant Conference in 2021. That was last year, so that's Reliable Plant through the Noria Corporation. They asked me to be their keynote speaker. And afterwards, Joe was in the audience, And he came up and sort of introduced himself, and that was pretty much the end of that. The very next week, because of COVID, everything was kind of crammed together, but the next week in October was the SMRP conference over in St. Louis. So I was over there and I gave a presentation, and Joe was in the audience again. After that, he came up to me and said, John, you ever thought about starting a YouTube channel? Because I think you would be fantastic. You seem to have the demeanor and sort of the presence, and I think you got the energy. So Joe sort of has been my mentor in this YouTube offering that I do. But also I know Joe very well, and I watch his videos online. They're not all maintenance and reliability related. In fact, he has a different perspective. He's a retired plant manager, but he's an engineer. He comes at maintenance and reliability from a plant engineer's perspective, or pardon me, a plant manager's perspective. But he also talks about other life things. Just a tremendous leader. I strongly encourage you to follow Joe on YouTube and subscribe to his channel. Again, these are three folks that I know personally. I know their backstory, and I know a lot about them, and I've been associated with Tom and Steve for a very long time, and Joe just recently. But ask the question in your organization, are you developing leaders, and are you doing leadership kinds of things? Are we just really polishing up management and calling it something different? I think if you're like me, you'll understand that we're not really creating leaders. We're just really doing like management plus. I think it's time, especially the 21st century here, certainly in 2022, we need to get busy at challenging and developing some leadership in our organization. This is very important. I wrote an entire book about it, and it's certainly important to me, and I like to think that I'm subscribing to some of the tenets in this as well. Look, I'm Dr. John, and this has been your Maintenance Minute.